really nervous. Hello beautiful souls, thank you for joining me today as I'm going to be sharing my personal journey for the past 2 years with chronic migraine. So let the magic begin. Firstly, thank you so much for joining me. If you're watching this, I really appreciate you hearing my story and receiving hopefully the things that I can share which can raise awareness and maybe help you or help people that you know, and maybe bring some insights or some inner peace or just some knowledge that you're not alone. This video definitely comes with a trigger warning. I am going to be talking about anxiety, depression, end of life thoughts, chronic pain, and all of those kinds of things which can be really triggering, and possibly even for myself they can be triggering. So fingers crossed that I don't actually get a migraine from the stress of talking about this. I wanted to tell my story because I guess I wish I'd had this when I first started getting migraines. Maybe even before I got migraines, I wish I had seen a video like this. Perhaps if I'd seen a video like this, I might not be in the situation health-wise that I am in right now. So if you're watching this, please do share this with your friends or your loved ones or your colleagues or somebody you feel that this may help or guide or just raise awareness to. Maybe you are experiencing this and you don't know how to share it with your loved ones. Then let me be the person to share that with them, to hopefully bring awareness and understanding to them. Like many of you, I hadn't really given chronic pain or chronic illness a second thought because I'd never had to, and now I'm in a space where I realise that actually more should be done to support people with chronic pain and chronic illness, and even just from a friend or a colleague or a romantic space there should be more awareness and more support and kindness. I'm very grateful for the people I have in my life at the moment. They are very supportive, loving people, and I can call upon them when I need them. But if you are in a space where you don't feel that you have that, then please do know that you can reach out to myself, even if that's just an email to say that you're feeling that you need someone, right? Because the most important thing is to know that you're not alone, because it can feel like such a lonely place. So my story begins in April 2021, and it was actually the 22nd of April. I woke up with a migraine. I'd never had a migraine before, and I'm not somebody who really ever gets headaches. I've probably had like 3 headaches in my entire life. Usually if I'm stressed or worried, it comes up in my stomach. I've had IBS before, that's usually what comes up for me. So I was really surprised when I literally woke up at 8 in the morning and I had intense pain in my head. I was really sensitive to the light coming in my room around my curtains and my door, and I felt very, very sick. I knew straight away it was a migraine because I'd heard people say migraines brought intense head pain, sensitivity to light, and nausea or vomiting. So I had this inkling it was that. And initially at first, because it just happened so out of the blue, I honestly just put it down to an illness. A couple of my friends had said they'd had something similar that weekend, and I thought, okay, do you know what? It's just a one-off. It's nothing to worry about. It was just a bug. So you can imagine my surprise on the 1st of June 2021 when I got another migraine. This one slightly took longer to build up. That first one was really just a day, whereas this one really built up and was across several days, about 3 days. I was very confused, and initially at first I put it down to the fact that I usually have acupuncture once a month as a minimum to balance my hormones, and I hadn't had it for 7 months at that point, and I thought, okay, well maybe I'm just really overdue some acupuncture just to balance out my hormones. So I found a local acupuncturist, kind of the only local person actually who does acupuncture. Luckily she's lovely. I booked an appointment to see her, and I thought, well, it's bound to go once I've seen her, right? Because acupuncture usually works miracles for me. I went to see her, and then again was very surprised when I had another migraine a few weeks later, so I booked to see her again. And at this point I thought, this is kind of weird. I've not had migraines or headaches really ever, and suddenly I'm getting them frequently. Okay, it was just kind of once a month, but that still for me was frequent enough that it was disrupting things for me. I went to see the doctor. I would normally be somebody who would really praise the NHS and doctors. However, in this particular instance, I found the doctor to be quite patronising and quite dismissive. I really felt that she didn't see it as a big deal, and she just wanted to get me out so she could get the next person in. And she said to me, oh, you've probably just got polycystic ovary syndrome. You're probably at the lighter end of the scale, so we wouldn't do anything but put you back on the pill. And I said, well, I don't want to go back on the pill. I've been on it for that and contraceptives for like 10 years. I'm really aware that it's not very healthy to be on it for an extended period of time. And she said, well, there's nothing we would do then. And she didn't tell me that there were medications that she could offer me for migraine. She didn't give me any suggestions of anything. She literally just was like, it's probably this, whatever. She did run blood tests and said that everything came back normal except for my ferritin level, which is my iron stores, was very low, and so to just take iron. So I started to take iron. So in this process I was kind of confused because I was like, I don't understand why this is happening. I can't seem to find like a physical reason for it because we've done blood tests and the doctor has just said, oh well, it's probably nothing. I'm not really sure what I should be doing. So I think in the first year I was quite in a space of denial. Every time I got a migraine I was almost shocked that I was getting one because I was like, why is this happening? I don't understand it. Like, you know, yes, circumstances and things in my life have changed and shifted quite a lot in the last few years. However, I've never had this reaction before, so I don't really understand what's going on. There has to be something physical that's happening here. Fast forward to January 2022 and I actually found a lump in my left breast, which I hadn't felt or known before. So I phoned the doctors and they very quickly saw me and they very quickly referred me to the hospital to have a scan there. And they were amazing. All of the team were really lovely and they really looked after me, and it was nothing to worry about in the end. But as you can imagine, the stress and the worry was really quite bad. And since already I was getting migraines, they started to get worse. It actually got to a stage where I started to develop more triggers, if you like. Initially it just seemed to be my hormones and it would be once a month I would get a migraine, but I suddenly started to develop what's called hyperosmia, which is an extreme sensitivity to smells, particularly strong smells. And I'm not somebody who's ever had a good sense of smell before. Honestly, I would never smell stuff if I walked into a room or a cafe or anything, and people I'd be with would be like, oh my god, that stinks, or can you smell that perfume? And I'd be like, no. I had a terrible sense of smell beforehand, and it's really strange that through developing migraine I have developed this really sensitive nose, and it's really odd to me. I just don't get it at all. It all started in early March 2022 when there was some garlic in the house that was slightly going off, and honestly just smelling the garlic immediately gave me a migraine, and it was such a painful migraine. It almost felt like it went in my left nostril and straight up to my left forehead, and it was like something was drilling through my head. It was so painful. And the thing with migraine that I never realized before is that it's not a bad headache. There are so many symptoms that can come with migraine. Yes, you can have nausea and or vomiting. Yes, you can have sensitivity light, but you can also have tension. You can have dryness in your eyes and your mouth. You can get tinnitus. You can get tension in your jaw. You can feel very dizzy. For some people that can go as far as being vertigo. For other people it's just a light dizziness. You can feel lightheaded. You can feel very weak. You can feel very lethargic. There are so many different symptoms, and migraine looks different on everybody, which is I think what makes it so hard to treat, is that it's very individual. It's very specific to you. So for me, I was getting all of the things that I'm mentioning, but for other people they might not have had all of those things. They might be experiencing something completely different. And I think sometimes this is kind of where the reluctance from doctors comes, is because to really understand and investigate a migraine, you have to really understand and investigate the individual. And that obviously takes a lot of time and a lot of resources and probably a lot of money. And that's not necessarily something that, for example, the NHS really has. That's just been my experience. You might find that you have a fantastic doctor or practice who really, really help you. And I really hope that you do. I pray that you do. My experience, unfortunately, has not been like that. In March 2022, I also took up a part-time job. And mainly that was because we all know I love to spend. You guys will have seen my haul videos. I was like, okay, if I'm going to keep spending, I really need something that can just be a wage to kind of enjoy, rather than taking money from my hard-earned money from my business, right, for frivolous spending. So I got this part-time job, and the first shift that I worked, I was hoovering at the end of the shift, and I'd taken the nozzle off the hoover and I was hoovering around the table and chair legs. Found that leaning forwards, I felt like I was getting a migraine. My head was hurting, and I was thinking, surely not. That is ridiculous. I surely can't get a migraine from bending forwards to hoover. That's outrageous. And again, I was really in this space of denial, and I got home and it really developed into one. In this time frame from April 2021 to March 2022, I had been mostly taking ibuprofen to stop or prevent or whatever the migraines. Late January, early February 2022, I started to develop what I now know was gastritis from taking the ibuprofen. Obviously, the film coating on ibuprofen can hurt your stomach. When you're taking that many tablets for that many reasons, and I'm not somebody who ever really, as I say, took stuff before, because I hadn't really ever had headaches or chronic pain or any need, like normally if I had hurt my back, I'd just go and see the osteopath and I'd be like, the pain will subside. And taking so many tablets obviously really upset my gut. I already have a sensitive stomach, so I developed gastritis. I went back to the doctors and she prescribed me something to help with that. When I went back to her again, when I started to get migraines every day after work, she suggested that I try some triptan, which is a common medication that they offer usually for preventing migraine. And you're supposed to take one tablet when you first feel a migraine coming on. And the doctor said to me, and I swear to God, these are her words, take them when you need them. And I was like, this is amazing. Why didn't the other doctor tell me this? If I can take these when I get a migraine, well, this would have saved me so much trouble. And maybe if that first doctor had prescribed that for me, I would not be in this situation, because I now know that with triptans or any kind of medication like that, that you're supposed to take one a week and not for more than 3 months in a row. But because the doctor just said to me, take it when you need it, and the pharmacist literally said to me, have you ever had these before? I said no. And they said, okay, and just handed them over to me. They didn't say, well, this is how you need to take them. And because there was such a large queue, you kind of feel that pressure, don't you, to move on. So I was like, okay, and I just left. So I started taking the triptans every day after work. I would feel a migraine coming on. I started to take them and take them and take them. But what I didn't realize is that when you take too much medication, you get what's called a medication overuse or a rebound migraine, which is where the tablet works for a little bit and you get a couple of hours of subsidence and you're like, great, it's going, but then it comes back full whack. And I didn't realize that I was doing that to myself because I had not been properly instructed. And yes, I did Google things. I'm a research lover. However, nothing came up to say, don't take these more than once a week. And genuinely, if I had known that, I, again, might not be in this situation, because medication overuse is something that very often leads to migraines from being episodic to being chronic. And I didn't know that. So unfortunately, I was giving myself daily migraines as rebound migraines because I was taking the triptan every day pretty much. One thing that was great was that she did prescribe me some anti-nausea medication. I have a huge phobia of being sick, so it was really nice that I had something that could stop that, could subside that, and I would definitely recommend speaking to a doctor about that. If you are somebody who has nausea or vomiting when you experience migraine, it's really horrible. So when I went back to the doctor again to say, look, I'm having them every day at the moment, not realizing I was doing it to myself, she said, okay, well, maybe we'll stop the triptans for a bit and we'll send you for an MRI scan. So I went for an MRI scan about July 2022, which is a really nerve-wracking experience, but what I will say is that a friend had them and she recommended to me to take an eye mask and to put that on, as well as the kind of ear defenders and masks and things that they give you anyway. And that was really amazing. That is a tip I would definitely be sharing in an upcoming video I have for you guys. So obviously, as you can imagine, when I did the MRI scan, it came back normal. And so I went back and I saw a different doctor this time, and I really broke down, because at this point I was getting to a stage where I really felt this was changing my life, and not in a good way. I really felt as though I was constantly anxious about having a migraine, about being triggered. Initially, as I say, it had just been what I thought was my hormones triggering me, but suddenly it was things like leaning forwards to Hoover, being dehydrated, being over hot, like it was a really hot summer last year, not eating enough, not eating at the same time every day, just so many little things it suddenly became. And I was like, oh my God, I can't do anything. Especially for me, something that has been quite triggering is artificial light, screen lights. Even as I said to some of you before, sometimes when I film, it's almost like over concentrating on something, like over concentrating on the viewfinder or the camera lens. That can trigger me as well. So it's got to the stage where it feels like just everything was triggering me, and I felt like I couldn't live my life. I felt like I couldn't be me anymore, and that was really upsetting and quite scary, because I'd spent like 10 years working on myself, healing myself, and becoming who I thought I was here to be and what I wanted to do. And all of a sudden I felt like migraine was taking that away from me. It was only when I was home alone in, I think, late July 2022, I felt very anxious and depressed, because I suddenly realized even things like watching a film or reading a book, all those kind of things were triggering me, and I just felt really miserable, to be honest with you. And it got to a stage where I thought, what is the point in being alive if this is my life? if pain every day is my life? And it was at that point that I thought I really need some help. So I went to see a different doctor, purely because they didn't have an appointment with the doctor I had been seeing. She prescribed me beta blockers, and for some people beta blockers works great. For me it just didn't. I was on them for about 8 weeks. I only had like 4 days without migraine in those 8 weeks, which is great to have 4 days, but obviously the whole point is that you have 0 days with them, right? So I ended up having a 5-day migraine beginning of August 2022, and it was excruciatingly painful, and I was incredibly nauseous with it, even though I was taking my anti-nausea tablets. Because of that, it brought up a lot of anxiety for me, and I went back to see this doctor, and she said, okay, we'll take you off the beta blockers and we'll try amitriptyline, which is an antidepressant which releases, I think, more serotonin. So that's something that they use quite often for pain. So I know some people who, for example, have back pain, chronic back pain, and they take amitriptyline for that. Or they might prescribe it for you for depression, or they might prescribe it for you for migraine, right? There's lots of reasons they would prescribe it for you. In the process of swapping over tablets, I became so stressed and so anxious. I started to have what they call heightened or acute anxiety attacks. And I have to be honest with you, that was probably the most traumatic experience I've had, where my whole body was shaking. All the blood was draining out of my forearms and my calves, and my knees and my hands were kind of cramping up. I was hyperventilating, therefore I was very dizzy. My mouth was very dry. I genuinely felt like I couldn't breathe, and I felt very faint, and the whole thing was really scary. And sometimes it would last, say, 10 minutes. Sometimes it would last a little bit longer, and then afterwards I would be so physically exhausted that I would fall asleep. And I think I probably had this for about 4 days, 5 days, a couple of times a day, especially in the morning. And it was really scary. I didn't know what was happening to my body. I've never experienced an anxiety attack like that before. I would never wish that on anyone. I eventually had to get in touch with the emergency mental health team, and because I hadn't been referred to them, they couldn't do anything for me, so they recommended I went back to the doctors and asked them for some diazepam. That is what was prescribed to me once I'd spoken to the doctors, and I did take that, and it did help to calm me. I only took it for a couple of days because that is known to be quite an addictive thing to take, and I was really conscious I didn't want to become reliant on anything. And of course, ultimately, all that kind of medication does is really kind of suppress or repress what's going on. It doesn't actually treat the root cause. So for me, it was really important that I didn't become reliant on something, that I instead tried to work on that. So I started to see a counsellor initially once a week, and at the moment I'm currently seeing her once every 2 weeks. That's just what I can afford. Otherwise I probably would see her more because she's great. But I really needed that. I needed that support. I hadn't realised how anxious and depressed I'd become because of migraine. And I've experienced depression before, but I've never experienced it in this way, where because it's something chronic, therefore it's daily, the thought of having it every day for the foreseeable future, because there is currently no conventional cure for migraine, that is just something that really holds you in that space of depression and anxiety, because you just think, well, literally any day, any time it could come, it could happen. The amitriptyline did ease the migraines a bit. It did stop them being every day. However, it has made me a lot more sensitive to artificial light, so therefore it makes it really hard for me to work, because in my part-time job, obviously there are lights on around me, and those lights can trigger me quite a lot, and I've started to get quite a bit of vertigo from the lights, which has led to vestibular migraines, which is a whole another ball game. They are really awful. I really empathise with anybody who's had vestibular migraines, or just migraines in general. It genuinely is just the most horrible experience. It's kind of like, the best way I could describe chronic illness is, it's like, let's say you break your ankle and it starts to heal and you're like, yes, great, I can go back out, I can go for walks, I can play games, whatever. And then you break your ankle again and you're like, oh, okay, or okay, hopefully it won't happen again. And then it starts to heal, but then it breaks again and you're like, oh god, okay. And you're just spending every day with this pain and this, something that's stopping you from living your life normally, right? As I say, amitriptyline was, for the most part, working, helping me. However, in January 2023, for some unknown reason, I don't know if I just got used to the dosage that I was on after 6 months or what, I really don't know. I had a migraine and I got vertigo for 6 days in a row, and then 2 days later I felt fine and I was like, great, yes, okay. And then the next day I had a really painful 3.5 day migraine again, and it just really set me back. It almost felt like when I'd first gone on to the amitriptyline, and initially I'd been a bit groggy on it and a bit dazed, because it's meant to make you quite drowsy. You're supposed to take it at night time and it helps you to sleep, and it works its magic whilst you're sleeping, and then you feel okay in the day. Yeah, I just don't know what happened, and the doctor was like, oh, maybe you had a virus. And I was like, I don't think it was a virus, I think maybe I've become too used to the medication. So she just upped my dose. So that's where I'm at the moment, is trying a higher dose of amitriptyline. I have been prescribed anti-anxiety tablets, but as I say, I don't want to become reliant on something that is really just masking something. I'd really like to actually deal with it. So having therapy obviously is something that's really important, and that can be anything from like hypnotherapy to counselling to CBT, right? There's options to consider. So that's what I'm working on at the moment. So that's kind of where my story is. I hope that by sharing it, firstly it brings some insights, because as I say, I had never considered chronic pain or chronic illness before. I still do not know exactly what I have or I am experiencing at the moment. I have not had an official diagnosis. I have not been told you have chronic migraine. I have not been told you have chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia or anything like that, because if anything, I would say that the doctor is kind of like, well, the amitriptyline's mostly working, so we'll just say that you're fixed. And I'm like, whoa, that's not the case. We need to understand why that's happened and work from that. I am actually going to be doing a part 2 to this video where I'll be sharing tips and feedback on things that I have tried for migraine. So don't forget to subscribe so you can watch that when I release that, hopefully next week. Migraine is really individual to the person, so I hope that by sharing just everything I've tried, which is a lot of stuff, something might bring some ease or comfort to you. And if it doesn't, that's okay. As I say, it's very individual. And if you have something that you tried that I don't mention, I'm very open to hearing that and receiving that. I hope that this video has been informative. I hope that it will really raise awareness that chronic illness and chronic pain is exhausting, mentally, physically, emotionally, and even spiritually. If you know someone with chronic illness, please do reach out to them. Please do connect with them, see how they are, see if there's anything that you can do to cheer their day up, whether that's phoning them, whether that's visiting them, whether that's making them a little goodie basket, whether that is just saying, I'm thinking of you, you are not alone. Because those really small things just mean so much, because ultimately, I have felt very unlovable and I felt like a burden, and it's made me really withdraw from a lot of things, because I just feel like if I do something or if I go somewhere or if I meet someone, I'm going to be the burden and that's going to put them off me. And that's something that I'm working on myself, because obviously that's not true. I wouldn't feel that way if I was hanging out with someone with chronic illness. So yeah, it's a lot to work through, and I'm still very much in this space. It's very raw for me. Chronic illness, and specifically migraine, is not just a bad headache. It really deserves to be respected and acknowledged and treated, because at the moment I don't think that's really what's happening. So I thank you for watching, and I will hopefully see you for part 2 of this video next week.